Right, welcome back, everyone. Up next is Team 10, which is a team that's comprised by Capital One and the Center for Responsible Lending. So, Team 10, the stage is yours.
Hi, this is Melissa from CRL. So currently, the adverse action notice feels like a bit of a formality. It gives some facts, but doesn't really help the consumer understand what occurred. From the perspective of the consumer, they are probably receiving this notice weeks after they applied for credit, and they already know they were denied. A consumer is likely to think it's just a form letter that doesn't have any impact on them. They may not read it, may not understand the terms being used, and probably don't see that they have potential next steps to be more likely to obtain credit approval in the future. So it's important to note that while we came up with some recommendations to make this a better process for consumers and give them some agency over next steps, we recognize that the individual consumer has the least amount of agency and power in the transaction, and there are many structural issues in credit scoring and underwriting that need to be addressed to make it a more equitable system overall. So the problem we are trying to focus on and solve is how to emphasize the information that matters, provide explanations for key terms, and provide consumers with more direction to set them up for future success. Now I'll turn it over to Mark.
All right, so some of the principles we were working our way backwards from was that the notices that we send out should be clear and use plain language so that everybody can understand and follow along. We would like to encourage the use of affirmative rights within the disclosure. Also making sure that we're stating all of the actions that a consumer could take in order to understand their credit. And also just be a conduit so that we can be helpful and provide all the resources that would be helpful to them. One of the principles we were working from too is that we feel like we can operate within the existing law, and we don't feel like it's constraining to us at this time. Next slide. Okay, so this is the solution that we came up with, and we'll go one more slide, please. First, this is the adverse action notice that we look at today. And some of the things that we didn't like about this were, it's kind of difficult if you look at this, it's difficult to figure out what information is relevant to the consumer. It kind of just looks like a big blob of text that nobody really wants to read. Some of the things, it's also not obvious like what steps they can take when you look at this, or like even where to direct their attention. So thinking back to some of those principles that we had, we wanted to make these a little bit more helpful and a little bit more informative to the consumer, and also to make them really actionable so that they can read this and then go actually change the future. But this version of it, we didn't feel like was likely to lead the consumer to better outcomes. So if you go to the next slide, this is what we came up with. It's a little hard to see, but some of the things that we changed, just to walk over at a high level. First, we wanted to, you can see over on the left, there are some bubbles there. And really, we wanted to take the turn down reasons. We wanted to make them upfront. We wanted to make them draw attention so that they immediately draw the consumer's eyes to the reasons why they were declined. And then, like beyond that, if you go a little bit further down, we have a couple more bubbles, and these are kind of helping us emphasize the actions that they can take. Kind of going one by one on the 4 boxes, like you have like showing them how to get a free copy of their credit report and then providing a link to like how to do that. Sounds like it's actually going to lead to them actually taking action, which is great. Showing them how they can dispute information if it's wrong, and also providing instructions on how to do that. Providing links to educational tools, like how to learn more about credit, how to learn more about definitions of these variables, how to make this all make sense. And then finally, like a link to credit counseling resources so that they have plenty of options as to like learn how to deal with credit and how to work with them in the future. So like looking at this at the end, we thought this would be much more likely to lead to better outcomes for the consumer. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley to take us through next steps.
Hi, everyone. You can switch to the next slide, Jennifer. We talked a little bit about the benefits, linking to the useful government information about counseling and credit scores, and clear information for accessing and understanding, and then possibly improving and correcting credit bureau data. Next slide. We also think it's important just to think about next steps even beyond this process, because one thing that became increasingly clear during this process is that we can we can standardize, and there's a lot more confusion that needs to be addressed. There are several terms that need to be standardized and demystified. What is an inquiry? What is a derogatory public record? There's a lot of information on these forms that most consumers won't understand or won't be familiar with. And so the need to create some sort of standardized glossary, perhaps through the CFPB, that lenders can use, that puts things in plain terms, that lenders can include with adverse action notices. We even talked about no longer calling it an adverse action notice, because that automatically seems just negative and not encouraging. And even the terminology that we use internally that somehow that also gets out externally can be very discouraging and confusing for consumers and doesn't help the process. The need for more technical assistance in the process, and after you receive a notice, what happens? How does your lender help you? What kind of extra time is spent to explain these things and also help you to take a second look and look at other alternative factors and about the borrower that actually indicate that they are credit worthy beyond just what's in the standard credit report. And also just remembering that we have to improve the system itself and improve access to credit in general, and remembering that these systems already have bias baked in, right? Their credit scores and credit reports are not reflective of people's ability to pay back loans, but really reflective of centuries and generations of systemic inequities and discrimination against people of color. And so really trying to deal with that at every turn. And so, having fair lending, your fair lending team be a part of every decision that you are making, and constantly reevaluating and evaluating the effect of the data and the systems that you are using, but also the outcomes, and being intentional about wanting to improve those outcomes across groups and extend credit and access to folks who haven't normally had that access. And also the role of the CFPB in continuing to provide strong oversight and enforcement to ensure that companies and lenders are doing this, and that access to affordable, responsible credit is actually increasing, and that more folks are being brought into the credit system and not kept out of it and sent to predatory lenders. And I think those are our main points, and we're happy to take questions.